Donate.
Live from our nation's capital, it's the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Good afternoon, America. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. I am your host, Mark Levine. Well, it's a tale of two Americas right now, right? For those of you who've been watching the Democratic National Convention, it's been a joy and it's been scary. It's frightening to know what we're going through. It's frightening to see it before our eyes, whether the threat is climate change or gun violence, or systemic racism, or whether it's a celebration, right? The 100th anniversary of women's right to vote occurred just this week. It was amazing just listening to Barack Obama. We're going to play a lot of what he had to say tonight, along with the vice presidential nominee, Kamala Harris. There was a lot of hope. And yet at the same time, it's striking that the news that's not being reported is even more scary, even more horrific than, well, let me just talk about what happened this week. And then I promise I'll get to the Democrats. One of the problems with Donald Trump is he does so many bad things that he takes your attention off the good. And so I will not be derailed. I promise I'll get back to Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. But just this week, the New York court, good news, the New York court ruled that Donald Trump cannot continue to hide his tax returns. He's got to turn it over. This, you may remember, went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, went all the way back. Now the court said, yeah, you have no excuse not to turn it over. Turn it over. I'm sure there'll be a later appeal. That's good news. Even deeper in trouble, Steve Bannon. Remember Steve Bannon, the big white supremacist, the guy who hates immigrants, sort of the moral lack of heart of the Trump universe, the guy who sort of embodies all of the evil therein. Yeah, well, it turns out that thieves can't trust thieves, and all those wonderful racists who really trusted Steve Bannon not to cheat them, well, he cheated them too. In his scheme to build a wall, while Trump couldn't get the wall that he promised, he certainly couldn't get Mexico to pay for it, Steve Bannon decided to build a private wall and stole $1 million plus from the people he was building a wall from. What do you know? Trumpists can't touch trumpet, can't trust Trumpists. That's hard to say. Trumpists can't trust Trumpists. Well, it's a tongue twister. But they can't. I mean, once a thief, always a thief. So he's been arrested. May he be convicted and spend a long time in the slammer. Going deeper and darker, Vladimir Putin today murdered yet another political opponent. This was actually a pretty powerful political opponent, Alexei Navalny, his most prominent political opponent. I don't know what courage, bravery, or frankly stupidity allows someone to speak out in Russia against that dictator. I don't know why Navalny didn't go abroad to somewhere safe. Presumably he was doing it for his people suffering under the brutal dictatorship of Vladimir Putin. But he flew on a flight, and in the hotel airport, he made the mistake of ordering and drinking tea. And Putin poisoned him, and he's dying now. I don't know about you, but I have a feeling Donald Trump wishes he could do that to his political opponents. And I don't think he's beyond it. I really don't. I just think that he doesn't have the kind of loyalty of people all around America who are willing to murder on his behalf. He's got people willing to defraud on his behalf. He's got people willing to commit treason on his behalf. Not quite yet willing to murder his political opponents, maybe. But all I can say is Joe Biden, make sure the Secret Service checks all your food before you eat it. And that gets me to the most serious and most damaging revelation that just came out this week and got almost no news attention. Remember when Donald Trump used to say no collusion, no collusion? Yeah, well, the Republican controlled, bipartisan Senate committee investigating has now found such significant collusion between Donald Trump and his campaign and Russia that they not only recommended the indictment of his campaign manager, Paul Manafort, who had a Russian spy on staff with the Trump campaign, someone actively working with them. And to be fair to the Russians, Trump accepted their aid with open arms, knowing it was Russian aid to rig the election. Not only that, but apparently the Senate, the Republican controlled Senate committee, recommended indictments not only against Manafort. They didn't just want to arrest all of Manafort and Corey Lewandowski and Michael Flynn and Roger Stone and all the big Republican campaign staff. They also recommended indictments against Donald Trump Jr. Did you read that in the news? It's there. You may have to Google it. It might be on page A23. To me, the fact that Donald Trump's son was recommended by a Republican Senate committee to be arrested for some kind of treasonous collusion with the Russians to rig our elections, you'd think would be bigger news. But we have a problem. When it comes to Donald Trump committing treason, most Democrats say, oh, yeah, tell me what else is new. Of course, Donald Trump betrayed our country. He doesn't have the decency of a Benedict Arnold, who at least fought for our country before he betrayed it. No, no, Donald Trump doesn't have the courage or decency of Benedict Arnold or Joe McCarthy. For a Democrat, the fact that Donald Trump and his family and his campaign were all committing treason in order to rig an election to help Russia is old news. And for Republicans, well, they're not going to believe it. Doesn't matter that a Republican Senate committee found the facts and it listed a very multi-page report. They're not going to read it. You're not going to read it. You know what? I probably won't read it. I might skim it if I have time. But the verdict's in. If you thought Donald Trump gave a damn about America, you're not going to be dissuaded no matter what he does. For once, Donald was right. He said he could shoot a man in broad daylight on Fifth Avenue, and his supporters wouldn't care. Do you think he could poison his political opponents, and his supporters wouldn't care? I think so. I think if Donald Trump did to Joe Biden what Vladimir Putin did to Alexei Navalny, his supporters would just assume it's all some deep conspiracy. Biden purposely killed himself in order to, I don't know, ask QAnon. Speaking of QAnon, do you know what QAnon is? QAnon is almost certainly another Russian conspiracy. It's this supposedly anonymous person group that is suggesting that Democrats are involved in some kind of satanic child molesting cult. You may remember the allegation was that Hillary Clinton did some kind of horrible sexual thing to some little child in the non-existent basement of a DC pizza parlor. You remember. Some idiot Trumpist believed it, went in, shot up the place, found out it didn't even have a basement, and is now serving some well-deserved time in jail. But what about the people who gave him the conspiracy? What about the people who incited him to commit violence? Will they ever go to jail? Will Trump and his team wear an orange jumpsuit? I hope so. not just because it matches his face. I want him and his son and Manafort and Roger Stone and Steve Bannon to all be in separate cells. Not out of any enmity I have toward them as individuals. I think they're odious individuals. It's more about this country. It's more about our democracy. It's more about saving our republic and the rule of law and the Constitution of the United States. We cannot let corruption and bribery become normalized. We cannot let ridiculous conspiracy theories, almost certainly coming from America's greatest enemy in the world, become normal. We cannot let a president steal blindly from the American people, use taxpayer money, try to rig our elections, try to end our democracy by doing such crazy things as defunding the U.S. Postal Service. It can't become normal. That's the message Barack Obama gave us. We'll have when we come back.
If you're worried your friend may be struggling, remember, you don't have to be there to be there.
You can say how are you or get a fake tattoo. You can ask with an app if it works for you. You could write.
Okay. Hello, Facebook audience. I don't know if Mark Grimaldi, my producer, is there. He may be. Okay. Yeah. So we'll be back in about 2 minutes, folks.
Creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1619. That was the day that the first ship bearing enslaved people arrived in North America. It was an English warship called the White Lion that came to Johnstown in the colony of Virginia. The ship was a privateer and had captured 20-odd enslaved people from a Portuguese ship in a raid. Virginian planters were interested in forced labor to work the tobacco fields in the colony. The laws surrounding slavery in Virginia evolved over time. Throughout the 1600s, statutes replacing indentured servants to race-based slavery for life were written into the law books. In 1654, John Kaiser became the first person enslaved under the rule of law in North America. By 1662, a law was passed that children would be considered enslaved or free based on the status of their mother in Virginia. This meant that slavery could pass down from generation to generation. This and similar laws ensured slavery would grow. Historians estimate that 388,000 enslaved people came to what became the United States from Africa. Due to laws passing down slavery to children, by the Civil War, there were nearly 4 million enslaved people in the South. By the early 1800s, enslaved people made up about 1/3 of the Southern population. Initially, enslaved labor worked predominantly to produce crops like tobacco, indigo, and also rice. Some West Africans had developed valuable skills in rice cultivation that white landowners exploited through slavery. With the invention of the cotton gin in 1793, cotton became increasingly important to the Southern economy. The South's dependence on slave labor became more entrenched and spread westward with the growing United States until the Civil War ended the brutality of slavery.
And now, the voice of reason in an unreasonable world, Mark Levine.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. While the president's men are all going to jail, and hopefully a lot more of them will go to jail, as I mentioned, the Senate report that came out referred criminal matters, including that of Donald Trump Jr., to the Justice Department, that promptly took no action because we know the position of Donald Trump's Justice Department is the president is above the law, can kill whomever he likes, can commit treason, can promote terrorism through this weird QAnon conspiracy, which, by the way, now the Republicans have active people running for Congress claiming to believe in this BS. BS is actually a really nice way to call it. Let's call it in this intentional, even conspiracy theory seems too nice. QAnon has been called a terrorist group by the FBI because what they're doing is they're railing up those people who are ignorant enough to believe in the screed and ugly falsehoods, again, I'm trying not to swear on the air, that Fox News is selling, actually go out and commit violence. They're no different, this Putin Republican QAnon conspiracy theory, than what Al-Qaeda does when it tries to radicalize American Muslims, usually failing, but occasionally succeeding. This group is trying to radicalize white racists, white racist Trumpists. And thankfully, we haven't seen too much violence yet, but sometimes succeeds. That's why it's a terrorist group. The Republican Party is welcoming a terrorist group into the Congress with a woman in Georgia, Green, is her last name, who actually subscribes to these theories. Again, theory seems a little too nice to this terrorist propaganda, this evil incitement of people to violence. Frankly, she's far more harmful than Al-Qaeda, because the number of American radical Muslims who are susceptible to Al-Qaeda's rhetoric in America is thankfully tiny. But I believe the number of racist Trumpists that are susceptible to violence and have the guns to carry it out is much, 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 much larger. I believe this woman, now running for Congress and endorsed by the Republican Party, is more of a threat to America than Al-Qaeda. All I ask is that the Republicans reject that. President Obama last night was as stern as I've ever seen him. It's largely been a very joyful Democratic National Convention. I've loved seeing the children in red, white, and blue sing the national anthem. Kind of brought a tear to my eye. And the roll call vote was clearly the best roll call vote in American history. I don't know why they have to do it from inside the chamber. It's absolutely right. I hope from now on they will always go from Alabama and Alaska to Wisconsin and Wyoming and every state alphabetically in between, showing our beautiful country, our wonderful, diverse people, our traditions, whether it's calamari in Rhode Island or wearing native garb in the Northern Mariana Islands, whether it's Matthew Shepard's mom in Wyoming, or the woman celebrating women's suffrage in Tennessee, or Khizr Khan in my home state of Virginia, talking about the sacrifice his son gave. But Barack Obama, who's not usually so severe, not usually so harsh, delivered a very frank indictment of the President of the United States. And just like his wife Michelle took the show on Monday, I think he took the show last night. Sorry, Kamala, you were very good. We'll get to you. And I know you're running for vice president, but the warning of Barack Obama is one that I will remember, I think, for the rest of my life. You owe it to yourself to watch the entire speech, but I'm going to play for you just a few snippets of the parts of it that most appealed to me.
I have sat in the Oval Office with both of the men who are running for president. I never expected that my successor would embrace my vision or continue my policies. I did hope, for the sake of our country, that Donald Trump might show some interest in taking the job seriously, that he might come to feel the weight of the office and discover some reverence for the democracy that had been placed in his care. But he never did. For close to 4 years now, he has shown no interest in putting in the work, no interest in finding common ground, no interest in using the awesome power of his office to help anyone but himself and his friends. No interest in treating the presidency as anything but one more reality show that he can use to get the attention he craves. Donald Trump hasn't grown into the job because he can't. And the consequences of that failure are severe. 170,000 Americans dead. Millions of jobs gone, while those at the top take in more than ever. Our worst impulses unleashed, our proud reputation around the world badly diminished, and our democratic institutions threatened like never before.
I want you to think about each of those words. Each of those words. I mean, I've talked a lot in the past few months about COVID, so has everyone. I focused from the earliest time I've been on the air this year on all the preventable deaths, on all the 170,000, and let's face it, it's going to be over 200,000 American lives, probably 250,000 before Donald Trump is done, that are going to die from his mistakes. And to be fair to Donald Trump, only about 99%, maybe a little bit more than 99% of the deaths are his fault. I fully accept that somewhere less than 1% of Americans were going to die anyway from this disease, a few hundred, maybe even 1,000 or two. Indeed, if you look at South Korea, you know that they lost 200-300 lives. So maybe we would have lost 2,000-3,000. We're not 10 times the size of South Korea. But we would not have lost 170,000, not even close. And the level of corruption, the unleashing of racist attacks in America, the threats to our democracy, it's severe. Barack Obama is right. Donald Trump just never grew into the job. He always saw it as something he could just wing, like a reality show. He could just lie like he did there, like he did in all of his businesses, and Americans would follow along. Well, the good president, is giving us a good warning. We're going to play more when we come back.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly?
About everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Storing your guns securely is the best way to prevent family fire, including unintentional shootings. For more information on safe gun storage and ways to keep your family safe, visit endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org.
What do we keep in the attic? What's this thing called? Can I ride my bike backwards?
Like I said, kids are curious. It's up to us to keep them safe. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and catch the bus. Text and miss your stop. Wait. Text and be late to work.
Sorry, I'm late.
Text and work. Text and pretend to work. Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working.
Who, me?
Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi.
Oh, hey.
Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
I'm Brenda Gazar, the host of Code WAC, your podcast on the state of America's broken healthcare system and how Medicare for All could help. Here's what we're talking about this time. Today, we'll talk about the driving factors of women experiencing homelessness. Amy Turk is the Chief Executive Officer of the Downtown Women's Center, the only organization in Los Angeles focused exclusively on serving and empowering women experiencing homelessness. Welcome to Code WAC, Amy. So nice of you to join us. What are the main reasons that women experience homelessness today?
The main reason that we find homelessness in general is obviously a lack of enough funding to afford housing, and then systems that unfortunately disproportionately impact mostly people of color in negative ways. But for women, it's usually an experience of gender-based violence that could lead to homelessness, or the impacts of typically making less money in general than men. And of course, that's more true for women of color. And just the compounding impacts of not being able to add to your wealth over time has left many older women in particular either vulnerable to homelessness or homeless themselves. I work with, many women that have unfortunately experienced domestic violence or sexual assaults or even child abuse. And in reports that we've produced at the Downtown Women's Center, most recently our 2019 LA City Women's Needs Assessment, over 50% of the women said that they had experienced domestic violence over the course of their lifetime.
Thank you, Amy. Find more Code WAC episodes on progressivevoices.com and on the PV app. You can also listen to Code WAC at heal-ca.org. This podcast is powered by Heal California, uplifting the voices of those fighting for healthcare reform around the country. I'm Brenda Gazar.
Back to the aggressive progressive, Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. Barack Obama last night gave us a searing indictment of the Trump administration. One that, frankly, any Democrat already knew and any Republican wasn't listening to. He admitted at the outset, wondering sort of what he could do. As he said, times are as polarized as they've ever been before. In fact, he didn't say this, but that's largely because that's how Donald Trump ran and how he continues to govern, and he frankly feeds off our hate. That's what he does. And so Obama points out, you may not vote at all because they're trying to basically make you cynical. And he actually concludes on that point, and I'll be playing that a little bit later on in the broadcast. But first he talks about Joe Biden. The fundamental decency of Joe Biden, the guy that cares about everyone, that has as a man who has as much empathy as Donald Trump lacks. The guy who returned every day on the train to Wilmington. It's a long train ride. It's quite a commute. about almost a couple hours every day, there and back, so he could tuck his kids in bed. But he goes on to say what Joe and Kamala can do, what Vice President Biden and Senator Harris can and have done, and why they'll be able to help get us out of this mess.
Along with the experience needed to get things done, Joe and Kamala have concrete policies that will turn their vision of a better, fairer, stronger country into reality. They will get this pandemic under control, like Joe did when he helped me manage H1N1 and prevent an Ebola outbreak from reaching our shores. They'll expand healthcare to more Americans, like Joe and I did 10 years ago, when he helped craft the Affordable Care Act and nail down the votes to make it the law. They'll rescue the economy, like Joe helped me do after the Great Recession. I asked him to manage the Recovery Act, which jump-started the longest stretch of job growth in history. And he sees this moment now, not as a chance to get back to where we were, but to make long overdue changes so that our economy actually makes life a little easier for everybody. Whether it's the waitress trying to raise a kid on her own, or the shift worker always on the edge of getting laid off, or the student figuring out how to pay for next semester's classes. Joe and Kamala will restore our standing in the world. And as we've learned from this pandemic, that matters. Joe knows the world, and the world knows him. He knows that our true strength comes from setting an example that the world wants to follow. A nation that stands with democracy, not dictators. A nation that can inspire and mobilize others to overcome threats like climate change and terrorism.
Just a second. Can you imagine an American president standing up for dictators prior to Donald Trump? I mean, don't get me wrong, we've had our slew of American presidents. I mean, I don't know who you think was the most corrupt prior to Donald Trump. Most would probably say Richard Nixon. The Richard Nixon, for all his corruption, all his flaws, all his cover-ups, all his attacks on the press and corruption trying to get himself elected, he didn't stand up for dictators like Donald Trump does.
Poverty and disease. But more than anything, what I know about Joe, what I know about Kamala, is that they actually care about every American. And that they care deeply about this democracy. They believe that in a democracy, the right to vote is sacred, and we should be making it easier for people to cast their ballots, not harder. They believe that no one, including the president, is above the law, and that no public official, including the president, should use their office to enrich themselves or their supporters.
Remember when that seemed uncontroversial? That presidents wanted people to vote rather than trying to prevent people from voting? Remember when most Americans believed that all of us, including the president, had to follow the law? Remember when Americans used to think that it was wrong to steal taxpayer dollars and stick it in your pocket? When they felt that bribery was wrong, rigging elections were wrong, treason was wrong, enriching yourself at the country's expense was wrong. The Democratic Party still believes it is wrong. And to be fair, there are Republicans like John Kasich and Colin Powell, George Will, conservative Republicans, who also understand that it's wrong. It used to be just an American thing. It's a shame that one party has become so un-American. President Obama went on.
They understand that in this democracy, the commander-in-chief does not use the men and women of our military who are willing to risk everything to protect our nation as political props to deploy against peaceful protesters on our own soil. They understand that political opponents aren't un-American just because they disagree with you. The free press isn't the enemy, but the way we hold officials accountable. That our ability to work together to solve big problems like a pandemic depend on a fidelity to facts and science and logic, and not just making stuff up. None of this should be controversial. These shouldn't be Republican principles or Democratic principles. They are American principles. But at this moment, this president and those who enable him have shown they don't believe in these things. Tonight, I'm asking you to believe in Joe and Kamala's ability to lead this country out of these dark times and build it back better.
Let's focus just for a bit on what President Obama is saying, because it's easy when you're in the middle of a hole to not quite probe the depth of the darkness we are in. I know that these are not normally Republican principles. Using the military to attack peaceful protesters? Yeah, Russia does that. China does that. Belarus is trying to do that now. Turkey, North Korea, Egypt. But America? I mean, the few times it's happened, I think back to Kent State in 1970, are memorable precisely because it's seen as so un-American that they were massive scandals. The free press. We have had a vibrant free press since colonial days. Lots of people don't like their press. I don't like some of my press. But they're not the enemy. That's kind of a basic protection. I mean, the fact that President Obama had to defend facts and science and logic and not making stuff up. Can you imagine the logical debate on that one? Well, I believe in logic. Well, I don't. I believe in science. I don't. I believe in facts. I believe in making things up. And yet this is a president who has lied more than 20,000 times over his presidency. And that's not just some number I came out of thin air. Go to the Washington Post, just Google 20,000 Donald Trump's lies, and they have a list. And you can look up lie number 9,832 or lie number 16,325. I recognize the president's only been in office for a little over 1,000 days. I also realize it's really hard to lie 20 times a day. But Donald Trump has managed to do it. Barack Obama is saying these aren't supposed to be Republican or Democratic principles, and they're not. They are American principles. And the fight today is for America. And I know there are lots on the left that were disappointed seeing all the Republicans at the Democratic National Convention. They're saying, what are these people doing here? They're conservatives, they're not progressive. They're with us, not because they agree with us on health care or on dampening down the power of big corporations. They're with us because they care about their democracy. And I say welcome. Join us. Let's protect our democracy. We'll be back after this.
America, your children have an amazing superpower. They can help save lives by not having play dates. That's right. By replacing get-togethers with virtual play dates and video chats, they can help slow the evil spread of germs. And if your superheroes do go outside, make sure they continue their superhero wing by staying 6 feet away from others to protect everyone in America land. Find out more at coronavirus.gov. A message from the CDC and the Ad Council. America, your children have an amazing superpower. That's right. They can help save lives by simply washing their hands. Just 20 seconds of thorough hand washing after they've coughed or sneezed or been outside can help fight against the dastardly spread of germs. Armed with only soap and water and hands, your superhero can protect you, your family, and everyone out there in America land. Amazing! Find out more at coronavirus.gov. A message from the CDC and the Ad Council.
He was the heart of your family, and he taught you our history. He helped you fix your first flat. He was the best backyard DJ around, and every time he'd tell a story, he'd own the room. But now more than ever, he may feel alone. Today, older adults and their loved ones are struggling to connect, in a time when connection has never been more important. But there is something we can do. Embrace our older loved ones through StoryCorps Connect. With StoryCorps Connect, you can honor seniors remotely with an interview about their life. Every interview will be archived at the Library of Congress, becoming part of American history, so that years from now, future generations can listen in.
All right, Grandpa, what's one piece of advice you have for me?
Just 3 words, sweetheart. Live with courage.
The man that had the best stories still has plenty of stories to tell. So connect virtually and share the conversation of a lifetime at storycorpsconnect.org/AARP. Connect, honor, share. StoryCorps Connect. A message from AARP, StoryCorps, and the Ad Council.
As progressive champion John Lewis warned, your right to vote is not guaranteed. You can lose it. You see, it's one thing to have the right to cast your ballot, but it's quite another thing to be able to exercise that right. During the past decade, Republican officials and operatives have become experts at voter suppression, using legal technicalities, poll closures, fraud, fear-mongering, and plain old thuggish intimidation to shut out voters who are inclined to support Democratic candidates. Rather than winning votes, their game is preventing votes. And now comes Donald Trump with a pernicious scheme to keep millions of us from having our say in November's election. Here's the story. Because of the spreading COVID-19 health crisis, a majority of Americans are reluctant to risk their lives by voting in crowded polling places. Shouldn't be a problem, though. Just let everyone who's concerned use our nation's excellent, reliable, trusted postal service to cast their votes by mail. But such a sensible solution panicked Trump. "Eek," he shrieked, "mail-in voting will increase turnout, and that's bad for me." Yet, he can't just ban voters from using the mail, so he came up with a maniacal Plan B. Simply defund the U.S. Postal Service so it can't do its job, thus forcing everyone to vote in person or give up their voting rights. Sure enough, in March he personally killed a bipartisan provision in the National Economic Rescue Package that would have assured timely delivery of our mail. Then in May, he installed one of his partisan mega-donors as Postmaster General, and he is now sabotaging delivery times by arbitrarily slashing the hours of postal workers. This is Jim Hightower saying, to help save our public post office and our right to vote from this tin-hatted third world potentate, go to usmailnotforsale.org.
And now, the voice of reason in an unreasonable world, Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I am your host, Mark Levine. Mostly just playing speeches from the convention. I've talked about some of the other horrible things going on in the nation. We're in a time of light and darkness. We're in a time of deep, deep darkness, but our leaders are telling us how to get out. I thought President Obama's appeal last night, and I'm getting to the heart of it, was as persuasive as if anyone I've ever heard. Now, I know you know that's my view already. But listen as he talks about cynicism, and the danger of cynicism, and how really that is their goal, cynicism.
Because that's what's at stake right now. Our democracy. Look, I understand why a lot of Americans are down on government. The way the rules have been set up and abused in Congress make it easier for special interests to stop progress than to make progress. Believe me, I know it. I understand why a white factory worker who's seen his wages cut or his job shipped overseas might feel like the government no longer looks out for him. And why a black mom might feel like it never looked out for her at all. I understand why a new immigrant might look around this country and wonder whether there's still a place for him here. Why a young person might look at politics right now, the circus of it all, the meanness and the lies and conspiracy theories, and think, what is the point? Well, here's the point. This president and those in power, those who benefit from keeping things the way they are counting on your cynicism. They know they can't win you over with their policies. So they're hoping to make it as hard as possible for you to vote and to convince you that your vote does not matter. That is how they win.
Think about that. Just think about that. They know they can't win you over. They know they're not helping America. They know that 170,000 Americans are dead and likely tens of thousands more will die. They know they're destroying the economy. They know they're promoting racism and hopelessness. And they want you to feel hopeless. They want you to feel like your vote doesn't count. They want you to throw it away. They want you to give up on your country.
That is how they get to keep making decisions that affect your life and the lives of the people you love. That's how the economy will keep getting skewed to the wealthy and well-connected. How our health systems will let more people fall through the cracks. That's how a democracy withers, until it's no democracy at all.
That's how a democracy withers, until it's no democracy at all.
And we cannot let that happen. Do not let them take away your power. Do not let them take away your democracy. Make a plan right now for how you are going to get involved and vote. Do it as early as you can and tell your family and friends how they can vote too.
Because voting is the only way out. You know, Russia had a democracy as recently as 10 years ago. As recently as 10 years ago, the Russian people still could choose their leader. Turkey had a democracy going back to the 1940s. 70, 80 years of democratic rule. Doesn't have one anymore. The Weimar Republic, for all its flaws prior to Adolf Hitler, was a democracy. You know, we're growing up with this idea of American exceptionalism, and part of that exceptionalism is this belief that because we have one of the world's oldest republics, they can never be undone. We're a bit blasé about our freedoms. Freedom of speech, we can say whatever we want, can we? When you protest outside the White House and you get beaten by the thugs that are supposed to protect our borders, are not supposed to be beating up American citizens for daring to criticize their police? Is it that big a hop, skip, and a jump from that to Vladimir Putin's murder today of his political opponent? A difference in degree, but not in kind. Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, they're all warning us to take our democracy while we still can, to vote while we still have power to do so, before a president that is trying to prevent us from voting, even going to defunding the American post office to try to get them stop delivering the mail. Veterans getting pills, life-saving pills in the mail, be damned. Let the military people die. Got to stop the vote. But you see, they haven't taken us yet. I'm still free to speak on the air to you. Will I be free in 4 years to speak out? Will I be in a prison cell? Oh, Mark, you're exaggerating. Am I? I agree we're not there yet. But if I told you a year ago that the president would cause the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent Americans, including his own supporters, and wouldn't give a damn, would you have believed me? If I told you 4 years ago that the President of the United States would conspire with our enemies, not only giving them our best intelligence, but working to give them hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money if they would rig our elections, would you have believed me? Would you believe me if I told you that the Russians were trying to hack our elections now and the president was supporting it while all of his aides go to jail for that very offense? Would you believe me if I told you that the President of the United States would endorse a wacko conspiracy theory so dangerous that it promotes terrorism worse than that of Al Qaeda? Our democracy is at stake. And frankly, the biggest threat is not Donald Trump, it's cynicism. Barack Obama is right. If you believe that you can't make a difference, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe you can't make a difference and you work hard to show you can't make a difference, you know what will happen? You won't be able to make a difference ever again. Democracy is not some gift from our founders that lasts forever. America, the greatest country on earth. We say it as a platitude, and when it's just a platitude, it can go away. America used to be the leader of the free world just 4 years ago when President Obama was president. At that time, countries around the globe looked to us for leadership. We were known as the beacon of freedom, the beacon of democracy. And whether it was a Democratic president or a Republican president, I did not like Ronald Reagan's domestic policies. But Ronald Reagan at least knew Russia was the evil empire. He at least supported democracy more often than dictatorship. So that's why socialists and conservative Republicans are coming together in an uneasy alliance to say we disagree on vitally important things like healthcare, corporate power, but we all agree that America has to remain a democratic republic. We all agree on the right to vote, the right to have a free press. And increasingly, even white conservatives, some of them, are starting to recognize that Black lives matter. It's not just white lives anymore. Yeah, Black citizens, they actually are American citizens and have every right that white citizens do. You think folks would have learned that lesson in the 60s, but they haven't, and they're coming to. I've run out of time. I was going to play some of the speech of Kamala Harris, our wonderful vice presidential nominee. Let me just say this. Having her there is appropriate because, let's face it, she was a strong prosecutor, California Attorney General. She was elected as senator by the largest state in the United States. She's clearly qualified for the job of presidency, and no one that I know of can give Joe Biden better advice, and particularly advice as it relates to taking apart some of those people's arguments. You saw how she destroyed Kavanaugh. She knows better than to trust what Joe Biden might call malarkey. But for all the hubbub about the fact that she's a Black woman, the fact that she's a daughter of immigrants, Indian American woman, that matters. Not just because it tells every little Black girl that she too can be president of the United States, but because she is a voice in the room for all of America, for other communities, a voice for the voiceless. And isn't that what democracy is all about? Tune in next week. We'll talk about the Republican convention.